Oh no, it was recording before. Sorry, now we're recording again. It's time for some more of this, and I can only apologise because I didn't do any last week because I wasn't feeling very well. So I did manage to do a little bit of Ice Monster, but by the time it was time to read this at night, I just was so tired. Sorry. Anyway, so we will crack on. We're quite close to the end. Look, can you see? I would say we're a good 3/4 of the way through, and we are on chapter 27. 27. And I can't remember what happened last time. Can you remember?
No.
We are no good at all.
Oh yeah, there was that big...
There was an explosion.
Shadow bomb.
The shadow bomb came, and they'd been on... Do you remember? They'd been to see the Star Talker of the Future sing, and she was singing, and then the shadow bomb came, and it blew everything up, and
Frolic went weird.
Frolics did go weird because...
Oh yeah,
the Star Talker of the past had died, and his phoenix. What was he called? The Star Talker of the past, Professor Byzantine. Excellent, not excellent, very sad.
Yes, Mum. Let's say it's excellent.
Let's not say it's excellent.
Let's insult his memory.
Anyway, so chapter 27. Mystica knew what had happened, though she'd wept. She had already dried her tears by the time they returned to the Sunfire. Yet it was even sadder for Lucky to see how bravely she composed herself, sitting up in her bed and refusing to show despair, thanking the stars instead that Frolics, Bixer and Lucky had at least survived. "What's wrong with Frolics?" said the captain as Lucky and Bixer carried him into the cabin and laid him down on Mystica's bed. "There's voices in my head," groaned Frolics. His face was shadowy in the candlelight. "Songs, and I don't know what they are." Mystica cradled Frolics in her arms. "It is your star singing to you," she said. My dear old comrade is gone. He has returned to the stars too soon. Now you have taken his place as Star Talker of the past." Sorry about that. Just had to shut the door because somebody's playing Fortnite downstairs. It's quite noisy. My dear old comrade is gone. He has returned to the stars too soon. Now you have taken his place as Star Talker of the past. You are coming into your power, as we always said you would. "But I don't want it," gasped Frolics, holding his head in his hands. "It's too much." "Many Star Talkers feel that way at first," Mystica replied gently. "But you can master it. Try, Frolics. Don't be scared of it." Her words didn't seem to comfort him. Watching her brother, Bixer looked even more troubled. "Something strange happened to us all, right after the bomb," she said. "Something like the living death. I've never felt anything like it. Suddenly, nothing mattered. Everything was meaningless. All I could see was myself, and I remember thinking maybe dark matter bombs cause living death." "I thought the same thing," said Lucky. "But then we recovered from it. I don't know how. Lots of people didn't." "So what did Gala tell you?" asked Mystica, peering at them through the flickering light. Lucky looked down. He couldn't bring himself to tell her all of Gala's dire prophecies. She said we had to go to Aquarius. She told the professor that that was where we would find what we were looking for. And she said I'd find my father. Only she didn't say how. Mystica shivered and pulled her furs tighter round herself. "She always speaks in riddles, that one. You never know what her words mean until it's too late. But that is the nature of the future. It is fluid. Nothing is certain." "She seemed pretty sure about one thing," said Bixer. "She said that you're right, Mystica. Aquarius is dying, and if Aquarius goes, everything goes." "Ah." Mystica tried to control her shivering, but it was no good. Her whole body shuddered at the news. "Then we can delay no longer. Captain, I know you will object, but kindly set a course for Aquarius." Captain Knox did not reply. He was staring at images of space on the vid screens. He seemed 1,000,000 miles away. "Ozymandias," said Mystica quietly. She reached out and took his hand. "My dear, will you set a course for Aquarius, please?" The captain blinked. "Aquarius?" He scratched the base of his horns, pondered the question in silence for a moment. "I know it is not safe," said Mystica. "The Axer fleet will be resisting the humans' blockade. There is bound to be fierce fighting, but that is where we must go." "We can't fly without Frolics," said Captain bleakly. "He has to operate the dark matter drive while I navigate. I can't do both at the same time." Frolics gritted his teeth. He made a massive effort and slowly hauled his huge bulk up until he was standing on his own. "I'll do it," he said. "I'll fire up the drive. We'll get to Aquarius. Don't worry, Mystica. You can count on me." "Frolics," cautioned the captain, "you are in no fit condition." "No, sir. But if I'm really going to do this Star Talker thing, then I got to do something normal too." The captain looked from Frolics to Mystica and back again, and then he exhaled in resignation. "Very well." He stood up. "If that's how you want it, then come along. We have work to do." "I can help with the navigating," Lucky pitched in. "I could use the astrolabe and help you find the best route." He pictured the ship's cockpit in his mind. He desperately wanted to be there, part of the action. He didn't want to think about the dangers they were going into or the possibility that he himself might be the biggest danger of all. He just wanted to do something useful. But the captain shook his head. "Help? How can anyone help us now, boy? We're beyond help." His horns glinted. "Besides, I don't want you anywhere near my cockpit. Wherever you go, bad things happen. Sometimes I'd swear you were cursed. So you stay right here and don't touch a thing." He left the cabin, trailing Frolics in his wake. Lucky felt crushed. "I can help," he thought. "I know I can." But the captain's right. I am cursed. Wherever I go, bad things do seem to keep happening. "Don't listen to him," said Mystica, interrupting his thoughts. "You stay here with me. I always feel so much warmer when you're here." Lucky sat beside her and Bixa on the bed. "Oh, sorry, it was Mystica. Don't listen to him," said Mystica, interrupting his thoughts. "You stay here with me. I always feel so much warmer when you're here." Lucky sat beside her and Bixa on the bed. Together they stared at the vidpics of the 12 Astraeus in silence. "So what else did Gala say?" Mystica asked after a while. "Surely there was more." Lucky bit his lip. He could hardly bear to think about it, but he made himself tell Gala's prophecy on the wheel. Now he was burning his life away, and how the professor had confirmed it. Did you know that too?" he asked the old lady. Mystica's golden eyes went wide with shock. She shook her head and took his hand. Her skin was cold, so cold, like death. "Are you absolutely certain that's what she meant?" she said. "After all, it was the professor who died on Scorpio, not you. Perhaps she intended the prophecy for him. Think carefully, Lucky. What were Gala's exact words?" The memory was crystal clear, and it made him shudder even now. "You are what you are, and you will return to the sky." "You are what you are," murmured Mystica. "What a strange thing to say. Did she at least tell you what she thought you were?" Lucky's throat constricted. It felt like there was a hand around his heart, crushing it. "She said that me and the wolf were connected. Me and the wolf are one." He could hardly breathe now. "What if that means I'm the wolf that eats the stars? What if I'm the one killing Aquarius? And killing you, Mystica?" There was a silence for a long moment. Mystica's golden eyes looked deep into him, though through his secrets and fears all the way to the centre of his being. "No," she said at last, "that cannot be true. Whatever she meant, I think I would know if you were the wolf." "There's something else," added Bixa, her needles glimmering. Right at the beginning, when Gala first felt Lucky's power, she looked at the Professor and he told her that you'd had your suspicions, Mystica. Mystica gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. What? Said Lucky. What suspicions? The old lady looked up at the vid screens. There was a possibility that the Professor and I wondered about, she said. We didn't dare believe it because, after all, it is so unlikely. But perhaps the thing we've been searching for, out here in space, perhaps it's been right here under our noses all along. She turned to Lucky, her eyes bright as sunrise. You, she said. What if you were one of the Astraeus? What? He shook his head and almost laughed. You're joking, right? But Mystica didn't look like she was joking. She was gazing at the vid screens, her eyes shining. His mouth went dry as he looked up too and saw those amazing people so vast and powerful. The light was streaming out of their hands, their heads, their hearts, just as it streamed out of him. The 12 Astraeus, she whispered, the stars who came down from the sky. She shivered and hugged herself. We thought you were channeling the power of the stars, but what if you are not a channel? What if you are the thing itself? What if there is a star inside you rising up as you come into your power? Lucky's scalp was prickling. His mind was reeling. He felt dizzy. It was like standing on the edge of the wheel again, or falling and falling and falling through the night. There can't be a star inside me, he managed to say. Those legends of yours, they're legends. Mystica wiped her eyes. Of course, she said, but how else can you explain all your powers? The heat, the light, the flames, your brilliance with the astrolabe? She peered deep into his eyes. And you say you hear the stars singing to you. That doesn't mean anything. Star Talkers hear them too. Star Talkers only hear one star, the star they are connected to. How many do you hear? I'm not sure. Lots of them? Lots, she said softly. She shook her head in wonder. That is something no Star Talker could claim. But look, Lucky pointed up at the fingers on the screens, with their wings and their halos, their flaming swords and thunderbolts, the people who held the whole world in their hand. They're incredible. They're like gods and they can do anything. I'm nothing like that. I'm useless and clumsy. Of course, breathed Mystica, clapping her hands together. Of course you are clumsy. You are bound to have trouble with anything physical because this human body is not your true form. Your deep being is that of a star. Oh, come on. Lucky kicked the floor with a cloven hoof. Okay, I've got some power, but what can I do with it? Kill people? Burn things? Hurt myself? But Mystica's eyes were glowing brighter as her conviction grew. You don't know your power's limits, she countered. You never truly let it go, have you? The Professor thought there might be no limit to it. If you did, no limit at all. She shook her head again. How extraordinary to think this might happen in my lifetime. Mystica, cried Lucky, totally embarrassed now. Please, if I'm an Astraeus, then where's my wings and halo? He turned to Bixa, knowing she would say something rude to put an end to this crazy talk. But Bixa's silver eyes looked thoughtful. It's not impossible, she said. The legends are old, aren't they? They're bound to have been corrupted over time. Maybe people wanted to remember the Astraeus as perfect gods, but that might not be the truth. All we really know is that they were beings who had power of the stars inside them. And your power, whatever it is, obviously has something to do with the stars, doesn't it? Lucky gaped at her. How could even Bixa be talking like this? If you really think I've got that kind of power, he challenged, then what am I supposed to do with it? That depends on which of the 12th you are, said Mystica. Each Astraeus was different. Each was the origin of a different kind of myth. All the war gods, sky gods, sea gods, love gods, the ancient pantheons, they all go back to one of the 12 Astraeus. So if we knew which one you were, then we might be able to guess your power's purpose. If you are the Astraeus of war, say, then you must surely be here to fight in the war. If you are the Astraeus of love... Bixer giggled at that, and Lucky blushed deeply. He stared up at the vid screens, trying to remember ancient gods and mythologies, but Mystica's words had prompted another thought. 12, he said. There's meant to be 12. If I'm an Astraeus, where are the others? I pray they are where Professor Byzantine believed we'd find them, behind the blockade, in Aquarius, replied Mystica. But even if I am wrong, and you are not one of them, then isn't it clear that the stars must have given you this power for a purpose? There is something you are meant to do with it. She gazed at him, and in her eyes Lucky saw hope still radiant in spite of all his denials. He felt deeply uncomfortable having that gaze upon him. He hated being the centre of such attention, the focus of such faith. He stood up and drew away from the warmth of the bed. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, he muttered, pacing the cabin like a caged animal. I'm never going to use that horrible power again. He expected Mystica to argue with him, as the professor had, and he was ready to argue back, to argue to the end. But to his surprise, her golden eyes filled with sympathy as she watched him. You poor boy, she said. I am sorry. It is not for us to say who you are or what you're here to do. You are the only one that can say. But please know this, Lucky. I trust you as I trust the stars themselves. Whatever you decide, we will support you. She was doing her best to reassure him, but his thoughts were growing darker and darker. Never, ever again, he vowed. He shut his eyes, and all he could see was darkness. It's not going to kill me. It's not. Are you all right, dear? Said Mystica. I didn't mean to distress you. He shook his head. He tried to push his feelings down, but they were overwhelming. It felt like his face was tightening, and then all of a sudden he was gasping for air and weeping into the night. Without a word, Mystica pulled him towards her and pressed her face into her arms. He felt safe there. It was warm and dark. It smelt like chocolate and spices. He let go and the feelings came out in a great flood. All the pain and fear and sadness he'd been holding in for so long. Mystica held him all the time, asking nothing, saying nothing, just letting him cry. Eventually, the weeping subsided. He felt strangely light-headed and relieved, as if he'd been washed clean inside. He felt embarrassed too. What was Bixer going to say? But he looked up to see her watching him with something he'd never seen on her face before, something like tenderness. Are you okay? She said awkwardly. Is there anything I can do? He couldn't help giving a wry smile. These were the same words he'd offered her on Scorpio when they were talking about death. How hollow those words seemed now. You were right, he admitted. There's nothing anyone can do, right? Not really, Bixer shrugged, but maybe it helps a bit, knowing you're not alone. Lucky wiped his eyes. Yeah, he sat up straighter. Can we talk about something else? Something good for a change? Tell me about this place we're going to, Aquarius. Oh, it's the most beautiful system, Mystica declared. We've crossed the whole galaxy, witnessed so many wonders, but none compares to home. Let me show you the great nebula you'll see as we approach Aquarius. We have an old vidpic of it. She tapped on the wall, and the screens all rippled and resolved to show one giant image, the swirling arms of a spiral nebula. Lucky gaped at it, goose flesh prickling on his skin. It was like seeing one of his oldest memories brought to life, the vidpic he'd grown up looking at. I know that place, he gasped. There's a vidpic of me as a baby with my mother and father. We were under that nebula. We were there. Is that so? Said Mystica. She stroked her chin. Well, it all seems fitting, for a nebula is a place where new stars are born. It's a kind of astral nursery, and this particular nebula has some of the most beautiful stars in the galaxy. Remember, Bixer? How could I forget? Bixer's needles glowed silver. It's my first memory of anything, ever. Stargazing in the nebula with our aunts and uncles. The skies were so clear. I'll never forget seeing those baby stars being born. She grinned. You're going to love it, Lucky. It's really something special. Lucky felt cheered by the prospect. After the horrors of Scorpio, after Gala's prophecies, after all the doubts and fears that were tearing him apart, here at last was something good and bright and pure, something that spoke to him of better times when his parents were still together, when he was safe and protected beneath a father's smile. It gave him hope that he was getting closer, that they would be reunited at last. Because whatever the Star Talkers said, his father was the only one who really knew the truth about his power, and he was going to prove that. Lucky wasn't an Astraeus or a wolf or anything strange and supernatural. Just a boy who wasn't going to die. Right, sorry, I got a bit distracted with that, but I'm going to read that to you next time. The wolf is close, the Astraeus of birth cannot survive it, for it is the end of all life.
Yeah, honestly.
I know.
It's dark.
Those bits are dark. Right, hope you enjoyed that. See you next time. Bye.